Everyone knows the story of NFL 2K5. It's the greatest football video game ever made. The next year, Dark Lord of the gaming industry, Electronic Arts, signed an exclusive deal with the NFL, and the rest was history. 2K5 was 2K's final NFL game, and the story ends there. Or does it? After Sega sold 2K to Take-Two Interactive, the company wanted to re-enter the football video game market. With Madden being the only NFL game allowed, 2K had to think outside the box. What they ended up creating was a football game filled with nearly 250 of the greatest NFL players ever, including Jerry Rice, Barry Sanders, John Elway, and more. Without an NFL license, they couldn't create NFL teams, so users were given the freedom to create their own teams from scratch, choosing a logo, uniform, and roster by selecting players from the pool of historic greats. 2K took the same revered 2K5 gameplay and improved upon it, adding new animations, mechanics, and graphics, while keeping the same foundation that made 2K5 great. This resulted in the creation of the best playing football game ever made, All-Pro Football 2K8. No football game has ever come close to matching the authentic gridiron action of 2K8. While the game was flawed and lacked the depth of 2K5 or Madden, the gameplay was so good that it didn't matter. As time has passed, new creation software and tools have prolonged the life of this game, allowing users to recreate NFL, college, or any other league inside the game, as well as use software to play through a fully fledged franchise mode, which wasn't originally possible when the game released. This is the story of All-Pro Football 2K8 in 2019. The gameplay footage I'll be demonstrating is from 2K Football Now, who has a YouTube channel and a Twitter page linked below. He used editing software, which I will go over later, to create a 1993 NFL roster, complete with all players and uniforms. One of the first things that might stick out at you from watching this gameplay is the pocket formation and movement. The way the quarterback moved up into the pocket to step up and make a tough throw, or the way the pocket could collapse in on him and allow a sack was lifelike. The way players moved, the fluidity of the animations, it all looked better than anything before it, and even today, looks much nicer than Madden. Let's take a look at Randall Cunningham throwing the ball in 2K8 and modern Madden. As someone who's always wanted to play quarterback as a kid and would practice throwing the ball over and over and over, the way Cunningham shifts his weight, winds up, and spirals the ball off his fingers is on point in 2K8. In Madden, it just looks awkward. The graphics look prettier, but when comparing these animations, 2K8 looks way more realistic, and this game is from 2007. 2K, even today, love them or hate them, has always had a knack for attention to detail, and this game is full of it. On dropbacks, 2K8 has the quarterback step back exactly like he would in real life, and you can see his body weight shift to his back foot on the last step of his drop. It just looks nice. In Madden, Cunningham just sort of hops backwards. If any quarterback's drop looked like that in real life, they would probably become a meme. Let's look at how the ball is snapped. It's not always perfect. If you had a bad center or a long snapper, he could be inconsistent. Here the ball is delivered over the head of the punter and into the end zone. This does happen in the NFL. Another realistic animation present in this game is the strip sack animation. This animation is not in Madden. A defender grabbing your quarterback, spinning him around, and the ball flying out as he is sacked is not a strip sack. In 2K8, like real life, the defender can swipe the ball out of the quarterback's hand without having to tackle him. EA hasn't yet found a way to introduce this into Madden. As you can see, for a game without an NFL license, 2K8 sure played like an NFL game, more so than its competitor. I just made a video about Madden 08, which I thought was a great game on previous generation consoles. But 2K8 was a much better on-the-field representation of football than that game. While 2K8 doesn't have a deep franchise mode or the many game modes as Madden 08 did, the gameplay blew it away. And while Madden has regressed over the years in the depth department, and not really caught up in the gameplay department at all, 2K8 continues to shine. The ball was thrown with a perfect arc. Throwing off of a 3 or 5 step drop was important, as the ball would come out most accurately at the end of the drop back. Running backwards and throwing the ball up would result in a wobbly underthrow, just like in real life. You could throw the ball over the defense, Receivers could actually catch fade routes, something I went over in my Madden video. Receivers could track the ball mid-air and adjust to it to make the catch. Offensive linemen blocked so intelligently that some people felt that the running game was overpowered. Big hits from defenders were powerful. Size mattered in this game. A large player with heavy weight would play like one, and one-on-one situations between two players would be impacted by this. By the way, 2K8 didn't have player ratings. You know how every year Madden hypes up their game by releasing player ratings on a 1 to 99 scale? 2K8 didn't do this. Instead, they used gold, silver, bronze, and generic to distinguish players. Players who weren't generic would have special abilities, which were more in-depth than player weapons found in Madden 08. And Madden is just now implementing a feature like this into their game in Madden 20. Every position in 2K8 has special abilities that a player may or may not have had. These include quick release, where a quarterback would have a faster release time, rocket arm, where you could charge up a quarterback's arm for an extra long throw, fourth quarter comeback, quick feet, run coverage, leadership bonus, soft hands, ball strip, you get it. There were so many abilities, and they were so spread out amongst the initial 250 players. This made every player feel and play differently. Now, despite the game's impressive animations, this game has the most physics-based feeling of any football game besides maybe Backbreaker. The gameplay felt free, with the player having all the control. You never felt like you were getting sucked into a predetermined animation. I often see people argue that current Madden isn't as bad as we think, saying something along the lines of, "It's a video game, it's not going to be perfect." The issue with this excuse is that 2K8 was able to do all the stuff Madden players have been asking for in 2007. Madden doesn't need to be identical to real-life football, but it should be better than 2K8. Visually, the game takes an interesting approach. The player models look a bit cartoon-like, and while some are turned off by this, others such as myself love them. They give off a very 1980s look, a throwback to a different era of football, which is likely what they were going for considering the selling point behind this game was the inclusion of 250 licensed NFL players from an older era. It also helped the game stand out, and not just be a knockoff Madden. The game is also in HD, on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, which makes it more graphically impressive than its predecessor, 2K5, which ran at 480p. And like I said earlier, 2K is one of the best at having attention to detail. For an unlicensed game, the minor details were crazy. The football was very detailed, even having visual concepts written on it in the font of Wilson, the NFL's official ball, as well as an All-Pro League logo that looks just like an NFL logo. The stadiums were all unique and honestly spectacular. You had dynamic field conditions where snow would build up and cover more and more of the field as the game went on, as well as dirt coming up from under the grass throughout the game on a clear or rainy day. Injured players would hobble mid-play. Some even attempted to keep playing and would fall as their legs collapsed under them. Uniforms had realistic cloth physics, which sounds dumb but was pretty advanced for 2007. Each position had proper footwork and technique that was sound. Presentation was as close as they could get to 2K5, with the same two fictitious announcers of Dan Stevens and Peter O'Keefe. Without the ESPN license, however, the halftime show didn't have Chris Berman, but Dan Stevens takes over and the experience is almost as good. Quarterbacks had their own signature throwing animations, which I'm glad Madden has added to Madden 20, but it just goes to show how much care was put into this game, a game from over a decade ago. An interesting change from 2K5 to 2K8 was the new kicking mechanic. This mechanic, similar to Madden's Vision Cone, was controversial, as it had a learning curve and wasn't easy to master. However, it's the most realistic kicking experience you could have. You need to pull back on the right joystick to snap the ball, and as the kicker winds his leg up to kick the ball, you have to push up on the stick exactly when the kicker swings his leg. The stick emulates a leg and ends up delivering an experience where you actually feel like you're kicking the ball. I personally love it, and think it's the best kicking mechanic ever in a video game. Team building was a fresh and new experience. When playing online, every team looked different and had their own set of strengths and weaknesses. This was because 2K gave players a budget of 2 gold players, 3 silver players, and 6 bronze players, with the rest being generics. This meant players had to pick and choose which positions they wanted to prioritize when building a team. For example, you'd probably want to choose skill positions with all your non-generic players, right? Well, what if the game came down to a last-second field goal, and your generic kicker didn't have the leg to push it through? Or your star running back has nowhere to run thanks to a generic offensive line? This added strategy and made online games a chess match. Similar to Ultimate Team, which happened to debut in Madden 10, 2 years later. Players could play online with their unique team. It was unlikely you'd go online against the same roster, ever. With Ultimate Team, however, the concept was built upon but in a worse way. Teams usually always have a mobile quarterback like Mike Vick, and grind or pay for 99s across the board. Teams don't have weaknesses unless a player was unwilling to grind or spend any money. Two 99 overall teams going against each other isn't exactly fun, instead it's repetitive. A 99 overall team playing a free-to-play player's 75 overall team is likely going to win by a landslide, which really isn't that fun for either side. Greed took over these companies, allowing in-game purchases in these game modes, which ruined the fun and competitive balance. Originally, like we see in 2K8's early version of the mode, it was a cool way to build a team with great players who never played together, such as Walter Payton or John Elway, on the same team. Today, this type of game mode has regressed to cheesing the AI with the same meta roster. When creating a team, you could edit every little detail of the uniform's design and colors, as well as logos. The game gave you a large amount of logos to choose from, and many of them looked pretty close to NFL logos. This creation suite opened the door to turning this game into an NFL game. While it wasn't as free as a game like Forza or NBA 2K in terms of what you could do, it was good enough to avoid any legal issues with the NFL, as well as allow users to creatively put their favorite teams into the game, or create a fictitious team with their own imagination. Sounds like 2K8 was a great game, right? So why does no one talk about it, and instead 2K5 is considered to be the best football video game ever made? Well, not many people actually played this game. The average football fan isn't going to buy an unlicensed game. It's sold poorly. Why else? No franchise mode. The developers didn't think a franchise mode would make sense in this game, as there was no way to have the historic players like Jerry Rice or Barry Sanders age correctly. A franchise mode with generic players would have been great for long-term replayability, but to be honest, it really wouldn't have made sense with the major selling point of the game being the licensed classic players. Instead, 2K included a single season mode, where you created a team and played through a 16-game season, and then 3 playoff games before the championship game. Then it was over. Despite this lack of depth, however, the game still managed to include the VIP profiles from 2K5, as well as have detailed stat tracking in the season, meaning, unlike Madden today, you could see what team a player played on each season when viewing career stats. Recently, however, hardcore fans of the game have been able to get more out of it than originally intended. With Madden being the way it is, most people who played 2K8 couldn't switch back to Madden without feeling like they downgraded. But without a franchise mode, there really wasn't any solution, until King Havo came around. Havo created an editor for 2K8 that gives the player the ability to not only fully customize teams and rosters, allowing them to recreate the NFL or NCAA in the game, but also adds a fully featured franchise mode to the game. That's right. This software gives this game a franchise mode. I put a link in the description to King Havo's Twitter and his website where you can download the editor. I also linked a playlist of his tutorials for using the software. Havo is also working on a football game called Legend Bowl, which looks awesome so far. He does great work. Now, despite the low sales and the lack of an NFL license, All Pro Football 2K8 could take the cake as the best football game ever made. Without a franchise mode in the box, however, it's hard for me to rank it above NFL 2K5. But 2K8 took 2K5's gameplay and improved upon it and perfected it. If you want to emulate what you see on Sundays through a video game, 2K8 is the only way to do that reliably. Anyone who is a hardcore football fan and wants to see exactly what a football game is capable of needs to play 2K8. With King Havo's editor, the game can also be a great replacement for Madden, as you can download or create your own updated rosters and uniforms. Also, at the time of this video, the Xbox 360 version of this game still has working servers, meaning you can still play it online. Due to the poor sales of the game, we probably won't ever see another football game from 2K or any other major publisher for a long time. I believe there is more of a demand for a game like 2K8 today than there was in 2007. However, most companies wouldn't want to take the risk of not breaking even, but that's okay. We still have 2K8, and with the help of software like Havo's editor, the game can last forever. Uniforms, players, and stadiums can all be updated each and every year to deliver a fresh experience. Why buy the newest Madden for $60 when I could buy this game at GameStop for $2.99, and it does a better job of portraying real football? Despite the age of the game and some faults within it, 2K8 has stood the test of time, and will likely continue to, until either Madden learns something from the game, or an unlicensed game such as Doug Flutie's Maximum Football develops into a contender. I know I will continue playing this game for a while, as I've yet to find any game that can satisfy my itch to replicate what I see on Sundays as well as this game has. You will not find a better playing football game than All Pro Football 2K8. Thanks for watching.